Alright guys, BLM here back with a new video, and in this video, we're back with another video about Survivor 50, where here I'll finally be getting around doing my preseason power ranking for the season, ranking every player on the season based on how likely I feel like they are to win the game, ultimately picking my winner pick at the end of the video. And straight up, I am recording this probably way before most people are going to end up seeing this video. I am recording this on the morning of June 4th, a little bit more than 24 hours before they end up starting filming Survivor 50. However, this video probably won't be coming out until much closer to the season's actual release. So I am recording this way in advance, largely because I'm assuming I'm probably going to get spoiled along the way, where that ended up happening with Australian Survivor versus the World, where spoilers were really just going rampant on Twitter. And again, I'm assuming same thing will go on with this. I'll probably accidentally get spoiled, so I might as well get ahead of it and record the video now. And because of that, there's going to be some weird things with this video. Obviously, again, this is recorded literally a week after the cast was officially announced. And through that, we technically don't know the 49 players at the time of this recording. Though by the time most people see this, again, you will. And even though we know their identities, we know nothing about how they played at this current time of recording. However, obviously for most people that are watching this, you will. But again, that will obviously play a factor here on the preseason power ranking, though obviously I will still be ranking them, which again will be really funny if it's not even the right 49 people, but still. Either way, here I'll be ranking the 24 players of this cast based on how likely I feel like they are to win the game. And even in this short period of just like a week and a half since the cast got leaked, my overall opinions on how people in this cast will do have radically changed. And to be fair, some of that's based on like listening to other people talk about the cast, also even hearing about like pregame things that have played a factor, and in general, again, I did actually make a preseason power ranking immediately after the cast leaked, just in case I did get spoiled, but again, we're getting ahead of that anyway, and with that, let's start getting to ranking 24 players to rank here, and let's start off at number 24. The player that I feel is the least likely to go on to win the game is Q. And again, I don't want this to be the case. I would love it if Q went on to win Survivor 50. I think that would be an incredible season. However, again, I feel like there's no way he is winning this season. And again, a lot of this just simply has to come down to my lack of faith in Q as a player. I just feel like Q is just such a chaotic player that I just really do not see who will actively be working with Q for much longer than a few rounds. I feel like Q's the type of player that, again, is he going to start playing very aggressively from the beginning and potentially create the initial majority alliance? Yes. But also, is he also the player that is going to blow up that alliance? Also, yes. And I feel like we've just seen Q be such a mess on his original season, and I really just don't feel like that's changing here. If anything, I actually feel like he's going to be playing that up even more. I feel like the type of Q that we're going to be seeing here is like Heroes vs. Villains coach versus Tokenshien's coach. Again, this Q that really plays into his persona and tries to ham everything up from his last appearance. And again, I just don't think that is the way to approach this. And I can see that completely backfiring, but also just in general, I don't have the faith in Q as a player. Along the fact that we've heard that, again, he's been pre-gaming seemingly very hard. Oh, well, we also have heard about people pre-gaming against him. To where, again, I really just feel like Q is a player here that, yes, I do think he could be leading his initial tribe for first few votes, but eventually I do feel like it is going to turn on him, to where even before all this talk about pregame, I already thought he was going to be an early boo. Again, spoiler alert for Survivor South Africa Return to the Champions, but I very much saw him as like kind of like a Chappies figure that people just saw as such a chaotic presence that they just simply could not trust him to work with him. And again, that is essentially how I am looking at Q here, to where ultimately, again, I do feel like Q is a player here that I just don't see it working out for him in the long term, to where while, again, I do think he could be well positioned on the offset, I just feel like he's going to blow that up himself. And even then, it's not even a guarantee that he is going to be well positioned on the offset. So where, okay, ultimately, not feeling great about Q. So again, he's here at the bottom here, number 24. Now, number 23, we're moving on to a player that this person was actually much higher on my ranking when I initially made it. I did have this person and towards the middle of the pack initially. However, the more I thought about it, the lower I am on this player. And at number 23, I do have Stephanie LaGrossa. And Stephanie here is a player that, like Q, I really have no faith in as an actual player. I feel like Stephanie, again, also came off very messy on her original appearances. And even in the year since, again, we've seen her obviously on The Traitors and on Snake in the Grass. And again, on Snake in the Grass, she was even more of a mess. And on Traitors, she was just kind of a dud. And with Stephanie here, I'm just kind of assuming it's going to be more of the same. Like, I feel like she's going to be a player that if she finds her group from the offset, yeah, she'll probably be in the majority, but she'll probably skate her way to the end in a spot where I just don't see people wanting to reward her with the win from multiple facets. merits first in the fact that, again, I don't think she is a player that will come off the most likable in the, where, again, I don't know how much she's really changed since like the Guatemala years, but also beyond that, she's also pretty rich from what I understand, where, again, her husband's a former athlete, and I feel like that's another thing that, again, are people really going to be clamoring to give Stephanie Grossa the win as well, where I think those are major negatives. But even beyond that, I now don't even have the faith that Stephanie's going to make it deep into the game anyway, where, again, at this current point, we've heard a lot of pregame talk about how Stephanie is targeting Cirie, and Cirie knows, and while obviously, again, some of this has been disputed, and again, that Stephanie wasn't targeting Cirie, but again, if that is something that was out there in the ether, that Stephanie was targeting Cirie, and Cirie actually is thinking that coming into the season, then, again, I don't feel like that's a good sign for Stephanie. There are people, again, actively pregaming against Stephanie, but, again, like, ultimately, it's just a spot where, like, I have no faith in Stephanie as a player. I don't really feel like she's changed that much since the last time we saw her. I still don't feel like she's the type of person that will end up winning a jury vote if she gets to the end of a modern game. And I also feel like she's someone that, again, could just be an early boot due to her being not as well connected. Now, mind you, again, I know she does have some connections. Obviously, she has Colby. She has Cirie, potentially. We'll see how that goes. Also, I know that supposedly she has a connection with Jonathan, where, again, she isn't, like, dead in the water coming in this season, but I just feel like she's someone that, again, I could see being an early boot, but I can also see her getting to the end and having no respect. I legitimately just cannot see her winning, and because of that, for me, she's here number 23. Now, number 22. Now we're moving on to another player that, again, I was higher on when we initially heard the cast. As more time goes on, the more lower and lower I do get on this person, and that person is Coach. And again, I would love it if Coach has a very strong run here, if he plays an impressive game once again after South Pacific. That being said, I don't know if we're getting that. And I do think the coach that we're probably getting is, again, more of the here's villains coach, a coach that's like really trying to ham everything up. Again, it does feel like he was doing a lot of trolling in a lead up to the filming of the season, to where, again, I do feel like that is more of the coach we're going to get than a player that is taking the game too seriously. And I feel like that is definitely a red flag. But also beyond that, like, how good of a player is Coach really? Like, obviously he played a very impressive game on South Pacific, but even then, I do think he had come out of South Pacific still questioning his overall game ability. Like, obviously he had learned from his first appearances, like, that's undeniable, but I do feel like it's still a spot where, like, I do question how consistent of a game he plays, how much he would be able to repeat that game, and straight up, I don't know if he would. And to be fair, I don't know if this is like the worst cast for him to repeat that. I do think he has a lot of similar minded people on this cast. Again, people like Jonathan, people like Joe, people like Colby, people like Stephanie. Again, Ozzy, if he's able to manage that relationship well enough, even though, again, we'll see how that goes. But still, like, I do feel like there are people here that I could definitely see working with Coach. I just do feel like that grouping is probably going to end up being the minority, though obviously a lot of that just comes down to tribe divisions. But even then, even when we get to a swap and get deeper into the game, I just feel like Coach is someone that I don't really have the faith in to be able to make it to the end with win equity. I feel like he's someone that, again, most people are just not going to take seriously again. Even if he gets to the end, again, I think he's going to have to really shake up his perception to go on to win the game. And to be honest, I don't even know if that's what his intentions are. Again, it very much feels like Coach is someone that is really coming in this season just kind of to make a show of it. And I do very much question just how much he's into the game, to mixing that in the fact that, again, I do think he is someone that could still be a relatively early boo, and also someone that I don't think people are taking seriously to begin with. I am rating him low. Now, again, for me, between him and Stephanie, I do personally feel like Coach is a better player than Stephanie. And also, like, I feel like there's at least more room there for Coach to have changed since last appearance, where Stephanie, we've literally just seen her on Traders and Snake in the Grass like a few years ago. Coach, we haven't seen on a reality show in almost 15 years. And I feel like, obviously, again, this is a potentially different Coach than what we got last time, though, again, I do not have much faith in that. But still, again, I do have him here at number 22. Now, number 21, and this is a spot here where I did debate this one quite a bit. I do feel like there's definitely an argument for this player being higher. I think this player probably has more potential than what we saw of him in his last appearance. That being said, I just don't really see it working out for him. And that player is Colby Donaldson. And again, Colby at 21 does feel a bit low, but it is a spot here where, again, I do think he is going to be lumped in with the Stephanies of the world, the Coaches of the world. I do think he is, again, an old school player here that is not particularly well connected. Mind you, again, there are reports that Colby has been pre-gaming. So again, we'll see how that necessarily plays out. But I still feel like Colby's in a spot here where I just don't know how well connected he is. Mind you, again, I think like Coach, I don't know how many people are taking him seriously. I feel like, especially after Here's the Villains, I feel like there's definitely a chance that people just want to keep him around as a potential number. Don't think of him as a big gamer. And to be fair, I don't know how much of a gamer he's going to be. Now, again, obviously Colby is someone that has supposedly been watching the show more recently, is more of a fan than when he was coming to Here's the Villains. And I think he'll definitely be more into the game than he was during Here's the Villains. That being said, though, I don't know how much there is to be had from Colby. And that's the thing, like, you can only be as much as what you actually are. And I feel like with Colby, it's like, even if Colby is well versed in Modern Survivor and has been watching the game, I don't know how much of that he can actually take to heart and actually utilize to benefit his game. Where again, I do think we're going to get a slightly more strategic edge from Colby this time around, but I just don't know if it's going to be enough, especially when he has no connections here. And I feel like, again, he's probably going to be lumped in with these people that I don't know if are going to be in the majority to begin with. Again, I do think these old schoolers are probably going to struggle on this season. I feel like Colby's definitely going to face some ramifications of that. Mind you, again, I think there's a shot. He is one that's kept around a bit longer, especially if he has been pre-gaming as hard as what it seems to be, where, again, I think there's definitely a world where like certain people want to like actively keep him around as an option for down the road, but I really just do not see the winning trajectory for Colby. I feel like even if Colby gets to the end, I just don't know if this is the cast that's going to reward him with the win, unless he really surprises us and plays this more aggressive game. But I just don't know if that's what we're going to be getting from Colby. Like, in many ways, I kind of just see him as like the Ethan in Winners at War. Again, a person that, again, an old school player that, again, tries to acclimate to the modern game and, again, has been watching the show, at least knows what he's doing, but again, it just doesn't work out for him. And I feel like that is how I feel about Colby here. So again, for me, he's here number 21. Now number 20, and now we're getting into a bit of a weird spot on this list. This is a person that, again, for all I know, by the time this video comes out, my opinion on this player is radically different. For all I know, this would actually be my winner pick by that point. But again, at this point, we simply don't know. At number 20, though, I am going with Rizzo. And again, for all I know, Rizzo is even the 49 male on the cast. This could be completely wrong. But at the time of this recording, obviously, again, it has been spoiled. The 49 male is Rizzo. And obviously, again, from where I'm standing, there's not much to really say about these 49 players. However, with Rizzo in particular here, again, I am assuming, considering the fact that he took Andy's spot in the cast, that he is, again, a super fan. Probably someone that makes at least a big move there. Again, obviously, Andy had Operation Italy. I feel like Rizzo likely at least will have a move on his resume that made them want him to bring back, which, again, will be all really funny when it turns out he's like an early boot or something. But still, again, Rizzo, just at the time that I'm recording this, is, again, just a complete unknown quantity. Though, to be fair, he is also for the people that are playing with him. And that is the thing about the 49 players in general, is that I do think there's going to be a lot of struggles for 49 players. Obviously, we've seen in the past, again, Russell Hantz had a lot of success playing back-to-back and them not knowing who he was. Malcolm was, again, pretty set on the offset, even though, again, that changed by mid-game. So realistically, I see this playing out more similarly to Zeke and Michaela, more so Michaela, where I do see the 49 players really struggling on the offset. I do think they're going to be looked at as these like easy outs. And to be fair, again, we pretty much never see them actually take that easy out on returning player seasons. Again, Michaela was someone that was on the bottom, was the decoy target, but ultimately Sierra goes home. We saw in Winners at War, Nick was in a similar spot, but ultimately Amber and Tyson go home. Again, it feels like people like Rizzo will become a pretty easy target from the offset, but ultimately they don't land on targeting him. But I still feel like from that point on, it is going to be tough for him to garner respect. Again, I think it is going to be hard for him to go on to win the game in a spot where just no one knows who he is. And again, it's not impossible. There's certainly a chance of that, but I really also just feel like Rizzo, again, from what we've seen him, just feels like a player that, again, I could see people being sketched out by, where again, I feel like he's probably going to be someone that is playing the game hard. And again, he's kind of like the devil you don't know, to where, again, I feel like they could target him because that. Also, like, Rizzo is extremely young. He is the youngest person on this cast. So again, if he actually is going to be going by Riz God, then I feel like that's also something that might kind of lower people's perceptions of him as well, which again might allow him to skate through the game, but also a spot where I do feel like it's going to be a struggle to have people respect him by the end. And again, I feel like for Rizzo, for me, I feel like there are going to be these issues with him garnering respect in the game, while also I feel like there is a chance of him being sketching out people, to where I don't feel great about Rizzo. But again, maybe I will after watching 49, but from this point where I'm recording, before watching 49, I don't see the path to a win for Rizzo. So again, he's here number 20. Now number 19, we're moving on to a player that, this is a player that, again, if he gets to the end, probably will win. However, I do think he probably has one of the toughest paths to get there. At number 19, I do have Kyle. Obviously, the winner of Survivor 48, that again was literally shown winning a week before they flew out. And again, I've said this before, that I think with winners, I don't think people are inherently targeted because they're winners anymore. Yeah, I don't think there's going to be this like anti-winner notion on the island that leads to Kyle going out. However, there is going to be an anti-threat notion. And I feel like Kyle is someone that just very much comes off as a threat based on what we just saw. Again, played a very impressive game, played a game that got hyped up as being very manipulative by the end, that he tricks Joe into taking out Xiaoheen. And beyond that, again, he's just such a well-rounded player that, again, I think a lot of people are going to be looking at Kyle as a massive threat, especially when he's on a cast with Camilla. And I feel like that is another thing that is going to increase this target on Kyle's back. And along with the fact that, again, we've heard rumblings about people having actively pre-gamed against him even before they even knew he was the winner. Again, I think things are pointing pretty south for Kyle. That being said, Kyle is a very good player. I think he's a very capable player to where, again, if he's able to avoid tribal early on, rejoin with the likes of Joe, have Joe add him to the bro alliance, I think there is at least a path for Kyle. However, I just feel like the path to the end and to win is, again, a very difficult one. Where, again, I could see Kyle making it to the merge. I just feel like there's almost no way people are going to allow him to get to the end, which is the main reason why he is lower than certain other players, because at least with that player, I can kind of see that person sneaking through the game a little bit more if things play out well. However, here, even in a world where Camilla ends up going out early, I feel like Kyle is still a massive target, and I feel like it's going to be a pretty insurmountable one here. I really just do not see the path for Kyle to get to the end. So I very much look at Kyle very similar to Ethan Zahn on All Stars. Again, a player that comes with a massive reputation, but someone that, again, could be kept around initially for challenge strength or as a shield, but eventually he still gets taken out, probably somewhere in the mid game. That is where I personally feel like Kyle is going to land, where, again, I really don't have the faith in Kyle to actually get to the end. But again, if he does, then I think you might as well reward him the money at that point. But again, ultimately, I'm going to land him here at number 19. Now, number 18, moving on to a player that, again, is directly connected to Kyle. And that's a lot of the reason why they're just low. At 18, I do have Camilla. And again, Camilla is a player here that I personally feel like she's screwed. I feel like Camilla is the prime first boot target for this season. I feel like she is someone that, if she goes to the first tribal, I would find it very surprising for her to survive that. Again, she has so many things working against her. First, the fact that she's the you should have won person, the person that literally a week before they flow out, they saw the jury talk about how they would have given her to win if she had gotten to the end. Also, she's a player that's hyped up in that finale as a liar, and we see her gloating about it in confessional. Also, she's here with Kyle, her number one ally, in a spot where people are not going to want to allow them to regroup, to where, again, there are so many red flags here with Camilla that just scream out first boot. I think Camilla is screwed if she goes to first tribal. That being said, though, if she survives that, and if Kyle goes, I feel like there's a little bit more legs for Camilla. Where I feel like there is a route where Camilla is able to fall into the back burner and maybe have a much better run. That being said, though, I'm not putting much faith into it. However, again, I think in the comparison here between Kyle and Camilla, I at least see more of a path for Camilla to get to the end if Kyle is gone than if Camilla is gone for Kyle. Where, again, for me, that is really the big differentiator here, is that I feel like with Camilla, she's already shown her ability to play from the bottom and still navigate her way through the game. And while I do feel like this season's probably going to be even more of a struggle than in Survivor 48, I feel like she does have a lot of good game ability, and I do think there is, again, a lot of potential there for Camilla as a player. I just think the struggles here is just the inherent target that is on her back. If Camilla somehow gets to the end, I do think there is a good shot that she's able to build up that win equity to potentially go on the win. I just think her path there is a struggle, which is the main reason why she's so low. And again, I think there is still a potential upside there, but I just feel like the odds for her early game just feel pretty insurmountable, especially with Kyle there, which is why she's here number 18. Now, number 17, we're moving on to a player that I'm surprised this person's this low, as I actually had them in the top half of my power ranking to begin with. However, as time goes on, the less confident I do feel like about this person's overall trajectory. And at number 17, I do have Suri Fields. And again, I love Suri. I would hope she does well. I actually think that's probably the best outcome for this season, if Suri finally gets her win. That being said, though, I don't think it's looking good. And again, it's not really from a spot where Suri can't win, as again, I think Suri can definitely win. If Suri gets to the end, if somehow a group actually takes Suri to the end, she is probably winning this game hands down. The problem is that I think almost everyone knows that, and I feel like this is a spot where, similar to Game Changers, I just really don't see a path for people to actively take her to the end. And to be fair, in Game Changers, again, at a point, Sarah was going to do that. Michaela was going to do that. Again, there is a world where Suri is able to find her group that is willing to do that. But even then on Game Changers, I feel like it wasn't as guaranteed that Suri gets to the end, she wins. This feels like a guarantee. Again, I feel like there's almost no shot Suri loses a jury vote on this season. I cannot imagine the world where Suri gets to the end and loses. And I feel like everyone knows that. And I feel like that is a big issue. Suri is how is she going to get there? Especially when she's someone that's, again, not prone to win immunities, play idols, even know how to make fire. Again, I feel like there's a lot of red flags there on Suri's navigation through the end game. However, that being said, I do feel like Suri actually should make it pretty deep on this season. Again, obviously there are the rumblings about her being pre-gamed against, but realistically, I actually feel like Suri is situated relatively well on this season. I feel like there's a lot of reverence for her from the newer players, and I feel like amongst the older school players, outside of, again, potentially Stephanie, but even, again, if the rumors about her wanting to work with Stephanie are true, again, I don't think she has many ops there either. Again, maybe like Colby, but outside that, again, her and Ozzy are obviously extremely close. Her and Aubrey are pretty good. Where, again, I think ultimately, I think Suri could be very well positioned here. It's just a spot where, again, yeah, can she make it to like final 7 or so? For sure, but can she go on the win? Will anyone actively take her to the end? Or can she bring herself to the end? I don't think so. And I feel like that is the big thing with Suri, is that I think to see a Suri win, we're kind of having to hope that people eventually just kind of simp for her, which I ultimately don't really see that happening with this specific group, to where, again, as much as I would love to see Suri win, and I do think she is a shoo-in to win if she gets to the end, I just think her path to that is very difficult. So again, ultimately, I'm landing here at number 17. At number 16, we're moving on to a player that I know is pretty high on most people's estimations. However, for me personally, I really just don't see it, even though, again, I think this person's a good player, and I think it has the potential to play another impressive game, but I just don't see the win equity there. And at 16, I do have Mike White. And Mike White is a player, again, you're hearing a lot of people talking about, people are going to want to work with him because of White Lotus, and he's just going to have an easy ride to the end, and people are going to vote for him to win, for cameos, and I really just don't see that world, personally. Now, again, I do see the world where people work with him. I think Mike White is coming this season with not much of a target on his back. I think people are going to want to work with him on the offset, and I do think, again, the talk about White Lotus might help him socially from the beginning. However, I don't think it's going to help him win the game. If anything, I actually think it's the complete opposite. I actually feel like Mike White is someone that has no chance at winning the game. I would be mind blown if a jury ends up rewarding Mike White with the win. Are you really going to reward a multi-millionaire with another $1 million? Where obviously there's a lot of talk about how, again, the jury doesn't care about how much people need the money anymore in the modern game, but it's like, I mean, one, Q does. But also, even beyond that, I do feel like Mike White is on a different level, though. Again, Mike White is, again, a multi-millionaire, where, again, this is like very different than someone like Genevieve, who has like a very high-paying job. Again, not to the point where she is just so inherently set off for the rest of her life. Where, again, I think Mike White is in a spot where I just simply cannot see a jury rewarding him with the win. I just would be mind blown at that fact. And also, I don't even think it's a guarantee he gets to the end. Mind you, I think it's very unlikely he gets taken out early. I do think, again, he probably will have people actively want to work with him. I do see him having a pretty easy ride to the mid game. But I do feel like he's a type player here, though, that, again, I think people are going to be onto his shtick this time around. I think people are going to be onto the fact that he is building the social capital and at least attempt to make a move on him eventually. I actually feel like that's probably the path I see most likely for Mike White, is him being like kind of like a mid-merge boot, one that eventually people realize just has so much influence in the game that you kind of have to take him out to kind of open up the game a bit more, where, again, Mike White is just a player here that, again, I think has the potential to play a great game. And I do think him being a celebrity is going to help him at parts of the season, but I ultimately think it is going to harm him in terms of win equity. And I do think he's the type of player that, again, I feel like people are going to catch on to by the end of the game here. So ultimately, again, I have Mike White here, number 16. Number 15. And now moving on to the other complete guess here. Could not tell you if this is going to be an accurate rating or not, but as of right now, at number 15, I have the other Survivor 49 player. I do have Savannah, which, again, also don't fit Savannah, but maybe it is. But still, again, obviously, in comparison to Rizzo, she is, like 5 spots higher here. And I feel like it's a world where, how I personally see it, again, based on what we know of them so far, I think Rizzo is someone that was probably cast more of a character. Savannah feels like someone that was more so cast because of her being a big player. Now, again, at this current point, I don't know how it ultimately turns out for her. Again, considering the fact that she took over Marianne's spot, maybe she's the winner. Also, could just be a player that played very aggressively and they wanted that on the season. It really could go either way. That being said, though, I do feel like Savannah is a player that I feel like fits into this cast a bit better. Where, again, she's in her like early 30s. She feels in line, again, the likes of like an Emily Flippin, a Genevieve, a Camilla, where, again, I feel like she's going to find her footing a bit better on this season. Though, again, that being said, I still think she runs into the same issues as Rizzo. I feel like it is going to be a struggle to see her ultimately get the win equity to go on to win the game. We're in a spot where just like no one knows who she is. Beyond that, also, I feel like there is going to be some danger early on. The fact that, again, no one knows who she is. And through that, that could lead to her being just an easy foe. And even then, a potential decoy boo. And again, I just feel like, again, with the 49ers on this season, I do feel like they're going to struggle on the offset. But again, based on what we've seen so far, I feel like Savannah is someone that I could see at least fitting in with this cast a bit better. Though, again, the question is she able to garner that respect by the end? And again, I just simply don't know that at this point. And running off of very little information on her. But ultimately, I'm going to land her here at number 15. Now, number 14. And now we're moving on to a player that I think is situated decently coming into the season. I don't think this person has a massive target on their back, and I feel like they have a lot of capabilities as a player, but also, I do think they're a very messy player. And at 14, we do have Emily Flippin. And I see Emily Flippin being pretty high on a lot of people's boards. And again, I think on paper, she is positioned pretty well here. Again, I don't think she has much of a target on her back. I do think she has a lot of friends in the alumni community. That being said, again, I just feel like I personally have no faith in Emily Flippin as a player. Again, where I feel like she's a player that, again, feels like she would be good on paper, but ultimately, I've never really seen much from her that leads to me thinking she is that good of a player. Obviously, again, I think the fact that she came from Lulu, is able to survive through that, and actually make it to the mid-merge is good. However, again, I think she completely misplays that portion of the game. Again, I think she should have been making a move to upset the read before power structure, where, again, in the position that she was in, she took out Bruce, a very loyal ally of hers, and just made herself a massive target to where everyone wanted to take her out. And again, I think that's poor play there. And transitioning that to what we've seen of her outside the show, again, her playing Blind Clock Tower, which again is obviously very different than Survivor, but still, I think it does show us how she approaches playing games, which I do think she is very narrow-minded in how she views games and gets so tunnel vision on a certain outcome that she kind of misses out on other things happening around her. And again, I think that is exactly what happened on Survivor as well. Mixing that into the fact that she is also very frank with people to the point where, again, some people get annoyed with her. However, I do think that'll also be endearing to certain people as well. Again, I think it's kind of a wash by the end, but I do think it's a spot here with Emily that, again, I just personally have no faith in her overall game ability, and I feel like she's someone that is coming into this probably playing very aggressively. Again, we've heard about her pre-gaming against Q, and I feel like in general, she's someone that is probably a bit too trigger happy. I feel like she's a bit too willing to make these big moves, and I could very much see her, again, just burning her allies for no reason once again. Again, I 100% see that happening with Christian, where, again, her and Christian have a good relationship coming in this season. I 100% see her cutting Christian for no reason on this season. And again, I just feel like for me personally, Emily Flipp is just someone that I just have no faith in as a player. To where, well, again, I think she is situated well coming in this season based on threat level, and again, could definitely win if she gets to the end. I just personally feel like there's just no faith there in her overall game ability for me. So again, I have her here number 14. Now number 13, similar thing, but probably less proof to the downsides here. But either way, at 13, I'm going to go with Chrissy Hoffbeck. And Chrissy's someone that I also see very high estimations of. I see a lot of people looking at Chrissy as one of their top winner picks. And again, I can see it. However, I think with Chrissy, for me, is that, again, I kind of see her as just an older version of Emily. Where, again, I think she's in a similar ballpark of, again, someone that is purely affable in most situations, but still someone that, again, a bit frank, can piss people off. Again, we know that the cast of HHH really did not gel with her by the end. Again, I think she will struggle to win a jury vote against most combinations in the end game there. While beyond that, I also feel like she's someone that can be a bit messy in the game. Again, we kind of saw her in and out of the majority at points in the HHH. Beyond that, she also has been pre-gaming pretty hard in a spot where, like, I could very much see her just really overplaying her hand. Where, again, I think there's personally some first boot potential for Chrissy, and really just in general, I see her overplaying. And even if that doesn't fall back on her, I don't really know if I see Chrissy winning this season. I kind of just see her in a similar ballpark as last time, to where, again, it's not like much has changed. It's been like 7 years. She was already in her late 40s when she played last time. I doubt she's changed much as a person in that time. Beyond that, also, I feel like she is still, like, complaining about how screwed she was and that the game was rigged against her, which is not a good sign in terms of her learning any lessons from last time. Where, again, the reason why she lost the game was not because of forced fire. She was going to lose anyway. And again, I just feel like Chrissy's someone that probably has not learned a single lesson since she played the last time. And again, I feel like that is the main issues here with Chrissy, to where, again, I think Chrissy's someone that definitely has potential. Again, I think she's going to be playing very aggressively. I could see her playing a game that people will reward with the win, but I ultimately feel like she's just going to be a player that plays the exact same as she did last time. And the question just now is, again, will jury reward that with the win in the modern day? And again, ultimately, we'll have to see. But again, I just feel like Chrissy's a player here that I think is very high variance. I could see her flaming out early. I could also see her getting to the end. I also just question, can she win? So again, for me, she's number 13. Now number 12, moving on to a similar thing once again, though at least with a little bit more room for change. At number 12, we do have Jenna Lewis. And Jenna Lewis is an interesting spot here, as again, she's obviously the Borneo rep. She hasn't played since Survivor All-Stars over 20 years ago. And through that, again, Jenna is someone that could very much be different than the last time we saw her. Mind you, again, there are clips online of her more recently, and that makes me think probably not. But again, I do think she's someone that, like Chrissy, like Emily, could get on people's nerves. Definitely got on people's nerves during All-Stars. People did not particularly like her by the end. Even on the original Borneo, she got on people's nerves. Jenna is someone that, again, back in the day, people did not like. Again, I think the only reason she had any semblance of win equity on All-Stars is because Rob and Amber were just hated more. And even that's not really a guarantee. To where, again, I think Jenna is someone that, again, I also worry if she can go on to win the game from a jury perspective. But even beyond that, I do think Jenna's also going to be very messy. And we obviously saw Jenna be like so gung-ho about wanting the winners out in her original season. And I feel like if she is like that aggressive strategically on this season, I don't know how that's going to work for her, especially because she doesn't have many connections here. where again, I see a lot of flame out potential for Jenna Lewis. I do think there's a lot of potential early boot energy, but again, unlike Chrissy, unlike Emily, there's been more time since her original season. Through that, again, I think there's at least more room for change, more room for introspection, and especially considering, again, it was also like her in her 20s before, now she's in her 40s. Again, obviously she has a lot more life experience than her first time around, where, again, I do feel like there's obviously a chance that Jenna Lewis is going to be a completely different person this time around, but ultimately, again, I do look at her pretty similarly to Chrissy and Emily, someone that, again, I think is going to play very aggressively off the bat, might flame out, but even if she doesn't, I just don't know if people are going to like her enough to reward her with the win. And to where I just feel like Jenna's just very high variance here, though ultimately, again, I do feel like she's like a step above Chrissy from my point of view. So again, she's here at number 12. Now, number 11, I'm moving on to, again, a player that you would assume would have a massive target on their back. However, the reason that it's high is simply because of my faith in them as a player. I do feel like they're a player that would do well had not been for this massive bullseye in their back, which, again, we just don't know how much of that is going to play a factor on this season. But at number 11, I'm going to go with D. And D's a player that actually was initially like number 3 on my power ranking. I initially had her extremely high immediately after the cast got leaked. And again, in the time since, I've been convinced, again, probably a bit lower. But I still personally do have a lot of faith in D as a player. Again, D, obviously, the winner of Survivor 45. And again, alongside Kyle, probably 2 best players in the new era up to this point. And again, plays a very impressive game, was able to corral people around her and get them to not target her. And again, I think with someone like D, I think she showed a lot of skills for the game her first time around, to where again, I think I could definitely see her doing that again on this season. The problem is obviously the fact that she has that reputation already, not just for being a winner, but also for, again, one of the best players of the new era. And I feel like also her appearance on the challenge is going to be on people's minds as well, that along with the fact that she was on fire. And again, I do think there's going to be this notion out there to potentially target D just because she is so prominent in the reality TV world. That being said, though, again, I just have a lot of faith in D as a player. I know some people have been saying like D is a potential first boot candidate. I really personally don't see that, especially considering how physical D is. Obviously, we saw it with Natalie Anderson, but again, Natalie Anderson had Jeremy literally on her tribe, and again, that was a connection that everyone felt like they needed to split up, where there really isn't that with D. Again, D's closest connection here is what, Emily, and again, even that wasn't really a relationship on the show, and obviously, that can be a criticism as well, and the fact that, again, D doesn't have as many connections, but I actually feel like D should be well situated here. Again, I know she goes to a lot of events. I assume has met most of this cast beforehand, and again, is a pretty stable strategic mind, where ultimately, again, I personally still feel like D is going to find her people on this season. I do feel like D, where again, I would be personally surprised if she is a early boot on this season. That being said, again, she is still going to be a big target, and kind of like Kyle, I just don't see her being able to easily navigate her way to the end. I do feel like there's always going to be this looming target over her. That being said, though, I feel more confident that D would be able to do that, though. And where I personally do feel like Kyle is coming in with a bigger target than D, and I feel like there is a world where D is able to get towards the end and potentially win out at that point, to where, again, I think D is a player here that, again, I do have faith in. And again, while I do think there is a lot of people potentially wanting to target her, and she is a big threat on the board, I do think my faith in her as a player is what lands her here at number 11. Now, number 10, and now we're moving on to a player that initially on my power ranking was extremely low. I literally had this person, I believe, like second or third to last on my initial power ranking, simply because, again, I think this is a player that coming in most given seasons has almost no path to the end. I think they're just someone that is too likable to look at as too much as a threat. However, as time goes on, the more I've listened to podcasts, I have kind of grown on this person's chances. And at number 10, I do have Christian Hubicki. And again, I love Christian. I would love it if Christian went on to win this season. However, again, my initial read on this is I just simply felt like there was almost no chance of that. Again, I feel like a lot of people target Christian instantly in any game that he's in. Instantly look at him as a massive threat. Also, just again, he's such a likable guy. And one that I think is actually probably maybe a tad too kind-hearted for the game. Where I think there were points in David Goliath where he probably would have come off as aloof if he, again, didn't have allies telling him about other people betraying him, which, again, credit to him for having those allies in that season. But again, the question is, will he have those allies on this season? And ultimately, again, with Christian, I very much worry that he would be an early boot. I feel like, again, he's just someone that inherently comes off as threatening. However, again, I've been convinced through listening to other podcasts, I do feel like Christian is coming into this decently well connected. Now, obviously, again, games like Blood in the Clock Tower, that ultimately doesn't seem to matter as he's still targeted right away anyway. But again, I do feel like on Survivor, it's obviously, again, a very different experience. And again, I think he is coming in with a decent amount of allies. Again, he has connections to a decent amount of the new schoolers. He obviously has Mike and Angelina from a season, which ultimately they're going to be closer to each other and probably still look at him as a big threat. But still, I do feel like there is a world where Christian's able to escape the early game. And in many ways, because of that, I kind of looked at him as very Suri-like. I do feel like at this point, maybe Christian does make it deep. But again, I still think it's going to be a struggle for him to get to the end. However, unlike Suri, I think Christian can sneak his way to the end. Again, I think Christian is someone that is actually like not terrible at challenges, and maybe he can win some there. especially in a post-Rachel world where, again, I don't know if there's that much of a difference between him and Rachel in terms of compatibility. Also, and he's shown himself to be able to find idols. And again, I feel like Christian here is in a spot where I do feel better about Christian because, again, I feel like Christian's the type of player. If he gets to the end, he wins. The question is just how does he get there? And again, the worry for me was always like the fact that he was just going to be targeted from the offset. But again, looking at the board now, I do feel like there are just bigger targets than him here. Again, there's the winners, the Cal Camilla duo. Again, there's Surrey Field. There's other players that I think are just going to be playing very aggressively off the bat in a spot where I don't know if Christian's going to do that. And I feel like Christian here, if he's able to chill from the beginning, I actually think can make a pretty deep run here. And again, I do think Christian has that potential to win out here to where, while again, I think it's a struggle to see people actively wanting to take him to the end, I at least feel like he can win his way there. So ultimately, again, I do feel decent about Christian at this point to put him here at number 10. Now, number 9, now we're going on to a player that I do think is a bit slept on in the Survivor community. This is a player that I think a lot of people just look at as, again, all challenges, no strategy. But in reality, I think this is a better player than people give him credit for. Though, again, there's still some qualms here of can he win. But at number 9, I'm going to go with Jonathan. And again, Jonathan's a player here that, again, I think a lot of people just talk about, again, him carrying the ladder. And again, all he did is win challenges and he was hated by his cast and he couldn't win, which again, at least that last part of it's true. But again, I think Jonathan's a player here that, yeah, again, did he struggle with win equity on his last season? Yes. Is that his big problem this season? Also, yes. But despite that, I think Jonathan is set up pretty well in this season. Again, he's someone that, again, is obviously new school and through that, again, maybe has some connections there. But also, I think he definitely can work with the old school players. I actually feel like he 100% is going to work with the old school players. And I feel like he's someone that can bridge the two sides a bit. Beyond that, I also feel like he is someone that obviously he's just never going out early. He's such a big physical presence to where I just cannot imagine a world where he's an early boot on this season. To where obviously, again, there is the potential for him being like something like the merge boot. But again, I think he is someone that is at least going to have a deep run on this season. And beyond that, I also feel like Jonathan has a lot more game to him than people give him credit for. Mind you, again, it was still not enough to win the respect of the jury and go on to potentially win. But again, Jonathan is a player, though, that does play aggressively. Again, he was essentially the glue of the Taku tribe at the very beginning of the season. And eventually, obviously, his social graces kind of went out the window. But still, like, at the merge, he created the strong person alliance and was able to keep it together for a bit. Also, at the Omer boot, he was the one that actually organized that boot to begin with. Where, again, I think Jonathan definitely is a more aggressive player than people like to give him credit for. That being said, again, I think the big worry here is, will it translate to jury respect? And again, we saw it last time not. And again, I would not be shocked if the same thing happens again, where people just simply are not going to want to reward him at the win. But I do think he is going to be a player that is playing harder than people give him credit for. I could see himself being pretty well positioned in the game. I just think, again, the win equity is the big question for me. But ultimately, I land him here at number 9. Now, number 8, moving on to a player that I think has the potential to shake up his game. Someone that I don't think is coming into this season with much of a target. And again, if he is able to change the game in the way that he talked about, maybe there's a chance of him winning, even though, again, I'm not really banking on it. But number 8, I'm going to go with Joe Hunter. And again, Joe is a player here that obviously just came off of Survivor 48. Again, literally finished airing a week before they flew out in a spot where, again, he played a very impressive game, but still lost the vote at the end. And again, a spot where he saw him, again, being duped on the show, in a spot where he just simply did not seem to have that much win equity. And again, we saw him in like post-game press, talk about how if he were to play again, he would try to play a different game. And again, really, this assessment here of Joe really comes down to, is he going to be able to play that different game? Because ultimately, again, I think if he plays the same game again, I still don't know if a jury's going to reward him with a win. And again, that is obviously a complaint. But again, he talked about playing a different game. And if he does play a more aggressive, villainous game, again, I do think he could gather the respect to win. Along the fact that, again, I don't think anyone's targeting Joe on this season. Where I feel like Joe is a player here that, again, came off of his last season being looked at as this honorable player, one that, again, is easily manipulated and also doesn't have jury prospects. So again, I think that is someone that, again, a lot of people are going to want to work with on this season, to where, again, I actually feel like Joe is pretty well situated on this season from the offset. Again, I think he's also, again, someone that can fit in with the old school and the new school. The question is, again, can Joe win the game? Has he changed enough to go on to win the game? And that is something, ultimately, I really don't know. Where I do think there's a serious chance that he's able to run the show once again creating this bro alliance with Jonathan and Ozzy and Colby and Coach. But again, the question is just simply the fact, can he win a jury vote? And I just am still a bit unsure on that, which is why, again, I find it tough to put him much, much higher on this list. But ultimately, I'm going with him at number 8 here. Now, number 7, we're moving on to a player that I think is coming into this season in a similar position to Jonathan and Joe. but probably with a slightly bigger target on his back, but also a lot more win equity. And at number 7 is someone that I thought was going to be at the bottom of my power ranking coming into this entire process, but somehow at number 7, I do have Rick Devens. And again, Rick Devens is someone that, coming into this, I thought he was going to be one of the biggest targets on the board. I thought he was going to be someone that is a prime early boot target. However, there's a couple things turning me away from that now. First, the fact that, again, I assumed he would be someone pre-gaming very hard, very sloppily, though considering, again, his name just simply never came up throughout the entire preseason. I think that's probably a good sign for how he's handling all this. And beyond that, I feel like Rick Devens is actually coming into this not as the biggest target. I mean, obviously, we have, again, more modern Jeff favorites on the board that could potentially be taken out over him. Just, again, bigger threats on the board over him. Along with the fact that, again, I think Rick Devens is someone that doesn't really have many connections here. And while that obviously can be a negative, I actually feel like it might be a positive for him here. And again, there's not as much of a reason to target Rick Devens over certain other players on this cast. And I feel like that is something that could give Rick Devens enough leeway to make it deeper into the game, especially in a spot where, again, he's part of this like 30s contingent, which I think can bridge the old school and the new school. And again, I think Rick Devens is actually positioned decently well from that point of view. While also, again, like Jonathan and Joe, has that potential to win out. Again, he is someone that is good at challenges. Won a decent amount of challenges his first time around. Also found a lot of idols, obviously. And again, I think if he is in a tricky position, I could definitely see Rick Devens sneaking his way to the end. That being said, though, I just question in general Rick Devens as a player. Obviously, we saw him be pretty ineffective in things outside of challenges and idols his first time around, and I feel like that's a thing that, again, I just don't know if I have the faith in him as a player to be able to pull off the win here. But again, he is the type of player that, again, is very affable, and if he gets to the end, I think people are going to want to award him the win, especially if he plays the game in as flash of a way as he did last time, to where, again, I think there's a lot of upside there, but again, I think just my question marks on him as a player and also a potential still for him being looked at as a threat from the offset is something that, again, is definitely a red flag that leaves him out of my top 6, but I think ultimately I do feel pretty decently about him at this point, despite coming into this thinking I'll be very low on him, but again, he's here at number 7 for me. Not number 6, and at number 6, and now we're going off a player that I think people are probably going to be surprised is this high, as this is a player that I think a lot of people were extremely low on when we heard about the cast coming out, someone that I personally had like towards the middle of my ranking when I first made it. However, the more and more I thought about it, I actually feel decently about this person's chances here, and that person is Ozzy. And again, Ozzy's obviously someone that, again, this is his 5th time. We've seen him play 4 times now. Each time played out pretty much the same way almost every single time. And again, he is someone that, again, on most given situations, comes to the merge, is a big threat, and is taken out not too far after that. And again, could that happen again here? For sure. That being said, though, I don't know if it will. And I feel like this is a spot where Ozzy, where again, he's not this like 20, 30-year-old that is in peak physical shape. That's like clearly the best competitor on this cast. Again, Ozzy's in a spot where, again, he's in his 40s. Again, you have Jonathan right there. You have Joe Hunter, who just dominated in challenges. Again, I think someone like Ozzy is probably going to be able to sneak his way a little bit more through this game, where I could see both of them being looked at as bigger targets than Ozzy on this season. Along with the fact that Ozzy, again, despite being old school, also has a lot of new school connections. I know he's been going to a lot of watch parties. Well, obviously, there's, again, a lot of controversies around Ozzy. I think for the most part, people do like Ozzy when they meet him, to where, again, I think there's a world here where Ozzy is pretty well situated coming to this season. I think he has, again, a decent amount of people he can connect to from the old schoolers, and again, has these newer connections as well, to where I actually feel Ozzy's pretty well situated in this season. I feel, again, I would be mind blown to see him be taken out early. I also feel like when we get to emerge, he's just going to have bigger threats around him. The question is, again, can he win the game? And again, I think he's more likely to have the respect from the jury than someone like Joe or someone like Jonathan, while also has that potential to win out at the end, while also even having the potential to have people want to take him to the end. And I feel like Ozzy is, again, in a spot here where I actually feel decently about Ozzy on this season, where, while, again, I still think there's the question marks on just Ozzy generally as a player, because, again, I think he's a questionable player, but, again, I think if there was a season set up for him to go on to win, I think this is definitely one of the better situations for him. So, again, I do feel pretty good about Ozzy on this season, which is why he's here at number 6. Now, number 5, and now we're moving on to a player that this was definitely one of the hardest players to rank on this entire list, because I actually think this is probably one of the safest people on the entire board. I would be pretty surprised to see this player go out early, as I just think this is someone that no one is looking at as a threat, and I think they're also pretty well connected. However, again, the question is still the win equity, but at number 5, I'm going to go with Angelina. And again, I've seen very different opinions on Angelina. Some people having her extremely high, some people having her extremely low. And again, for me, I ultimately feel like I actually land in the middle, but somehow that lands on her being at number 5 here. Largely because, again, I actually don't feel that confident on most of this cast. I do feel like this is a cast of players that there really don't feel like there are many, like, just shoe-in picks here. Everyone here I have, like, pretty big issues with their chances on this season. However, Angelina is someone that, again, for me personally, I think there is very little chance Angelina is a early boot. I just feel, again, no one is threatened by Angelina. People don't look at her as something they need to take out. I feel like Angelina also is pretty well connected to where ultimately, again, I think she is probably the person that I think would have the easiest time getting to the end of the game. The question is, can she win? And I think that is the big question mark here, where, again, for me, to where, again, how much has Angelina changed in the year since? I don't know. I mean, I think there's at least more of a chance than like someone like Chrissy, who again was already in her like late 40s. Angelina was, I believe, in her late 20s, now mid 30s, has since then become a mom. And again, I think there were some life changes in Angelina that could make her be a bit different than last time, though at the same time, again, I'm not really expecting her to be that different. But I do think there is a different perspective people have on Angelina nowadays, though, where, again, I think in the spot that we were at, where, again, no one knew Angelina coming into that season, I think there's obviously less reason to go on to respect her by the end. However, I think on this season, I think the general outlook on Angelina is very positive. People love Angelina, and I think people are going to know that coming into the season, which might garner her some respect by the end, especially if, again, they have pregame connections to her. And again, I think Angelina is in this spot here where, again, the big red flag here is win equity. Again, that is definitely something that I do question myself. However, I think there's at least more of an opportunity for people to go on the respect her game this time around, especially because I actually don't think Angelina's that bad of a player. I actually feel like she's a pretty competent strategic player. Again, largely self-interested at points, and at most points, like, seemingly knows what she should be doing, and again, just questionable on how much she's able to execute that. But again, I think there's at least more of a path to her having respect from a jury by the end on this season. So ultimately, for me, again, she's here at number 5. Number 4, and for me, this is the top 4. I think these are pretty definitively the 4 people that I personally feel like have the best chance to win. But at number 4, we're going to go with the person that I think a lot of people are having as their number 1s. Though I personally have a little hesitancies with that. At number 4, I do have Tiffany. And Tiffany is obviously someone that a lot of people are mentioning. Again, Tiffany's the type of person that wins returning seasons. Again, that's the meta of this WTF pick going on to win the season. And yeah, that is the meta. But that's also the problem, is that that's the meta. And I feel like Tiffany's in a spot here where, again, the meta has changed. I feel like the meta of, again, this under radar woman going on the win is simply just something that would not work in modern Survivor. I feel like everyone knows that that's the case and would actively be going against that notion, which again just seems to be like just the general consensus. Again, the fact that like almost everyone just instantly thought that Tiffany was the prime winner pick means that everyone else on the island also knows that. And obviously, again, there's still the chance that she sneaks her way to the end. And again, that's the reason why she's this high, is again, there's still the chance that does play out, and maybe that they don't end up targeting her along the way. But I just feel like the player that Tiffany is, again, seeing her on Survivor 46, again, she was just such a prime target by the end of that season, to where, again, I would be pretty surprised if she doesn't end up doing something that makes her come off as this big threat, especially considering I do feel like she's a player that I personally don't have that much faith in the grand scheme of things. Or again, this would be a different situation if I thought Tiffany was a great player, if she was someone that I would have confidence in being able to avoid detection and get to the end unfettered, but I simply don't. And again, we saw in 46 this happen, and we saw in like the Traders RHAP, which, to be fair, obviously, again, not much to really glean from it in the grand scheme of things, but I thought we had some questionable decisions being made there as well. And again, just some messy gameplay. And I feel like just in general, that's how I look at Tiffany. I do think she's a messy player. I do feel like she's someone that is going to make a target of herself by the end, or ultimately, again, I think Tiffany is someone that definitely has a lot of legs on this season. Again, I don't really see Tiffany going out early, and I do feel like she's someone that I could see having a pretty good connection on this season, but I ultimately feel like she's going to be too big of a threat by the tail end. And I think everyone's going to know that based on the meta. So again, I have her here number 4. Now number 3, moving on to a similar case, but someone that has probably more of a target on their back coming into the season, but also someone that I probably have a tad more faith in as a player, and someone that, again, my initial reaction to her being on the cast was to have her number 2 in my power ranking, but ultimately moved her down a little bit because of a certain other person moving up. But again, at number 3, I do have Genevieve. And Genevieve is a player here that I think, similar to Tiffany, just would inherently become a big target towards the end of any given season. I feel like she's someone that seems to be very personable, someone that plays the game hard, and because, again, I think Genevieve might struggle to get to the tail end. That being said, again, in comparison to Tiffany, I do have a bit more faith in her as a player, where with Tiffany, I was never particularly impressed with how she played any point in the post-merge in particular. Like, I think she was pretty well positioned in her original tribe, but so was Genevieve. But again, I think when we come to towards the end game, again, while, again, I still definitely disagree with the Saul move, I do feel like she still showed a lot of acumen for the game, especially when Operation Italy happened. And again, she was really able to turn her game around from being on the bottom. And I feel like that's a spot where, and that shows some decent game ability from Genevieve. And I feel like she's probably going to need it on this season, where again, I saw Rob Nino comparing her to like Winners at War Kim Spradlin. And I do feel like that is a pretty apt comparison here. I think people are going to probably be intimidated by Genevieve, thinking of her as a pretty threatening player, but I also don't feel like she's like the number one target on the board. To where, again, while I think there is at least a shot that, yeah, she is taken out early, I feel like I would more so lean towards her, again, being someone that is able to sneak on further into the game. And again, we've already seen her, again, play pretty well from the bottom, to where while I definitely, again, would have major question marks on how she plays from the top, as again, I feel like she probably is prone to making some big plays that probably won't work out for her. I do feel like she is a player here that definitely has a lot of skills for the game. And the question is just how much runway is she going to be given. So ultimately, I don't know if this is the greatest cast for her. I think she has a couple connections here and there, but I don't feel like she is coming into this the best situated on the season. But again, not dead to rights either. And again, I think ultimately with Genevieve here, I do think there's a lot of reason to think of her pretty highly coming this season. But where for me, I just kind of look at her as like the better version of Tiffany, but still a spot where, again, I would definitely have red flags on if she can make it to tail end. But I think if she does, she's someone that I could definitely see being rewarded with a win. But ultimately, I'm going to land her here number 3. Now, number 2. Now the top 2 for this list here was a very tough debate, as again, I think both of these players have major red flags here that would make me not want to pick them. One is a player that, again, I think has a bigger target on their back, while also unsure about win equity, while the other player, to be fair, probably also has that win equity issues, but also is a bit disconnected from the Survivor community. And again, I think both these players, major red flags here, but again, that really goes with this entire cast, which makes all this very difficult to end up landing on a number 1 pick. But ultimately at number 2, I am going to go with Aubrey Bracco. And Aubrey's someone that, again, my initial instinct was to have Aubrey, again, like hovering around the like 6-ish spot. Again, she was definitely lower on the power ranking when I first made this list, though as time went on, again, I am growing a bit higher on Aubrey. I still think there are, again, issues with Aubrey in the sense that, like, I don't know how into the game she's going to be. And really, that's probably the biggest red flag with Aubrey is that last I've heard, Aubrey has not been watching the show, and that she just seems so disconnected from Survivor community post Edge of Extinction, where obviously, again, she played a lot in that short period of time, played 3 times over the course of 7 seasons, which is pretty insane. But again, in that time since, I feel like she's kind of disappeared where again, she showed up and like talking with T-Bird, and even there again, talked about how like, yeah, if I was called for 50, I would accept, but she doesn't really have this like deep desire to play the game. But again, she's here now. And ultimately, again, I am just a bit unsure where exactly this is going to play out. I do feel like she's someone that if she actually is disassociated from the game, I do worry about her win equity. And again, to be fair, worried about her win equity back in Go Wrong, where obviously that was a season where it didn't seem like the jury had the utmost respect for her. And I feel like this is a spot here where I would worry about a similar thing happening. But Aubrey has also shown herself, though, to be a pretty good player. For a while, she's never had a particularly clean season ever. I feel like, again, she was able to recover pretty well in the post-merge of Go Wrong and end up playing an impressive game from that point on. In Game Changers, she was on the bottom for most of that season, but again, was still able to scrape on by. And again, I think that is something that is to be commended, especially on a season like this. And again, obviously, Edge of Extinction didn't play out well for her, but again, she was kind of screwed to begin with there. Well, I feel like on this season, again, I don't think Aubrey has a massive target on her back. I don't know who's targeting her, especially after Edge of Extinction, where, again, I think at worst, again, you have Q, obviously, who might be going after her because, again, she's setting up people left and right. But I don't really feel like people have a negative reception to Aubrey, and actually, again, probably want to work with Aubrey, especially this newer crop who I feel like Aubrey kind of fits in with them pretty well, to where, again, just the big issues here with Aubrey are just the fact that I just don't know how into the game she is, and I do worry about her being able to garner respect, but I also, again, feel like she is a capable player, one that, again, just almost no one is going to target here. So, again, a lot of red flags here with Aubrey, but also a lot of green flags. And again, ultimately, for me, it was between her and the number 1 pick, and really, again, it was the fact that I do think she is pretty disassociated from the current Survivor community that left her off of being my top pick here, though, again, she was somewhat close. But again, ultimately, I land Aubrey here, number 2. Now, number 1, my winner pick for Survivor 50 in the hands of the fans ultimately ends up being the person that I kind of had as my winner pick ever since the cast got leaked initially, and that person is Charlie Davis. And again, I think there are some major red flags to Charlie Davis. Again, Charlie is not someone that I am 100% confident in, but he is the person I am the most confident in. Now, again, I think there are definitely issues here in terms of, again, he is on the younger side of things. He is one of the youngest people on the cast, and I think, again, I get to definitely see a Spencer Bledsoe sort of position for him, and that, again, he's able to kind of ride the middle for a lot of season, but ultimately get to the end with very little respect, people not wanting to reward him. The money, again, I think that is definitely the major red flag for Charlie. Also, beyond that, he is a pretty big target, and again, that is a major reason why I was actually pretty low on Charlie Charlie for most of the preseason. I actually spent so much of the lead up to 50 thinking Charlie was dead to rights if he was on the season, as again, I thought he would be looked at as the Rob Cesternino, the Yao Man, the like very recent, very strong player that people are just going to want to instantly target. However, I actually feel like with how this cast has played out, it's turned out pretty well for him. I think he's on a cast here of a decent amount of connections. People that do like Charlie, again, he was someone that was the most followed of this cast on Instagram, and he also followed most of these people back. And I feel like, again, there are going to be a lot of connections here for Charlie, along with the fact that also Charlie is not really the biggest threat on the board at this point. Again, you have someone like Camilla, who I think has taken over that you should have won spot. You people like D and Kyle on the board. You have Sari there. And again, I feel like Charlie has kind of escaped being the biggest target on this season, a spot where, again, I thought he was going to be dead to rights coming into this. And makes it out of the fact that I think Charlie is a very capable player. Again, I think he is certainly up there in the best players on this cast. I mean, again, I think after Sari, D, and Kyle, I think I would have Charlie as the fourth best player here. And again, to put someone that capable in the game on a cast that is, again, pretty well situated for him, and both from, again, him having a decent amount of connections and also him not being the biggest threat on the board, I think it's a pretty decent spot. Now, again, there are still red flags. Is still a chance that he does get targeted early on because people see how big of a threat he is. There is still a decent chance that he gets to the end and doesn't get rewarded the win. Again, this is definitely not a person I'm like 100% confident in, but I do think of the picks that we have here, I think he's the person that I personally find the least amount of flaws in, especially considering how capable of a player he is, where, again, Charlie's just a player that, again, based on how he played in Survivor 46, outside of his decision to take out Venus instead of Kenzie, I feel like he played a mostly spotless game, a game that I don't necessarily disagree with the strategic decisions that he made throughout that season, which is, again, very rarely happens on any given season. Where I think Charlie's just someone that, again, I do have a lot of faith in him as a player, and I do think this is a pretty decent spot for him. So ultimately, I am going Charlie as my winner pick for Survivor 50. But there we go. I mean, that is my preseason power ranking for Survivor 50. Again, recorded all the way back immediately after the cast was announced. Again, we'll see when this video actually formally comes out. But again, I assume it'll be around the time that the preseason formally starts for Survivor 50. We're obviously expect a review and a player ranking for Survivor 50. We'll see what I do for mid-season power ranking, as obviously it will be weird, as I'll probably be spoiled, but we'll see how that goes. Also, I would not put it past me to make some other sort of video talking about my now like fully updated thoughts, especially now that we obviously have info on the 49 players, and obviously we'll get all the like preseason interviews, and maybe I'll do some sort of video on that. And beyond that, obviously, if you want to keep up my opinions on Survivor 50 as it's going along, you can follow me at Twitch at twitch.tv/review, where again, I typically stream at 11 p.m. Eastern time on the nights of the episodes, so you can follow me there. But beyond that is my power ranking for Survivor 50, again, a week after the cast flew out. But for now, that is the video. Thank you for watching.